Hi, District 6. It's Matt Ferentz here if I haven't met you in person. Trying our first Facebook Live event here. It's my first digital town hall. Ask me anything, and I have to start by saying straight up that it's pretty weird thinking about running a political campaign in the middle of a pandemic. Nothing feels normal right now. This isn't normal. None of what's going on is normal. But even though it's weird, more than ever, I'm devoted to a recognition that government matters. So my campaign continues, running for the Democratic nomination in the Pennsylvania 6th, hoping to become the representative in November. So this campaign continues just like U.S. House campaigns continue and campaigns for the presidency continue. And really they must. And it's not because we need to pretend that anything at all is normal in what's going on, but because the vigorous, intelligent, civic responsibility of government is all we have holding us together. And I'm saying that in the wake of not too long ago, a half hour ago or so, the governor of Pennsylvania, Tom Wolf, having ordered the closure of all non-essential businesses. And that's a pretty remarkable measure, but an important one. So this evening, I'm not particularly interested in politicking, and I'm certainly not interested in the kind of partisan team boostering that turns government or elections into a kind of game, a fight or a competition of who gets to win, mattering more than anything while everyone actually loses. That's not going to get us very far, particularly when we're facing very serious issues like we're doing right now with COVID-19 and more broadly in northwestern Pennsylvania and the Commonwealth at large. So I want to point out that right now we're seeing how government officials react under pressure. And we should be paying attention to that. And we also get to see how all of us react under pressure. And if you're anything like me, you've probably been on edge, maybe a bit snippy at times. I'm sorry to anybody who's received that from me. Short of temper, likely exhausted, probably worn out, confused, and probably at least a tiny bit scared. All of that is normal and right, I think. So I encourage everyone who's paying attention right now to pay attention to all levels of government, not just to what is happening, but also to how every elected official chooses to frame themselves at this moment. What values emerge, what fights they pick or don't fight, what political hay they try to make, and whether the actions they're taking are driven to help people or hurt opponents or hurt a party. We're seeing what parts of the nation every elected official cares about. Guards are down and the real faces of everyone emerges. So tonight, I want to think about civic pride and civic duty and civic togetherness. Something, if you know me, you'll hear me say a lot is, hey, I've been reading this great book. And so here's one that's called Become America by Eric Liu, which is a series of what he calls civic sermons. And these are from frequent gatherings that he's organized since the 2016 election to bring people together in a single space to think about what it means to be an engaged citizen of America today. And that can feel like a bit of a misnomer. How can we feel as one or engaged? So Liu writes it this way: I mean that the United States has a creed contained in foundational documents and given life in a fateful collective act. Devotion to that creed and the mystic memory of such devotion is what makes us American. One of the things I see right now is a lot of Americanness happening. Truly, I've been buoyed by the spirit of shared will that has been the sudden response and collective action related to COVID-19. Think about all the small acts of daily heroism, the teachers who have revamped their curriculums on the fly to offer almost instantaneously online delivery for their students, doing this work beyond their already underpaid, overworked terms of labor. Think about the nurses and doctors already toiling in hospitals filled with patients, and those here in northwestern Pennsylvania who are gearing up to do it, knowing that many of them will get sick because of that work, but who are going to do it anyway. Think about the small business owners who've closed up shop or already minimized hours or shifted how they're doing things, even though they can't afford it, because they understand the call to social distancing is real and necessary and a powerful act of civic duty and responsibility to our neighbors. At my own workplace, Allegheny College, think about all of the administrators who've been working crazy long hours, working to get students home, both to keep those students safe, and let's not lose sight of this, because they know their actions in going online as a college have a massive impact on keeping all of us here in Crawford County safe. Think about our governor and other elected officials in the county, in the city, who are canceling things because it is the right thing to do, even though particularly at first it definitely wasn't the popular thing to do. And think about yourself and other individuals who've taken this call to heart and are staying home. It's an odd kind of heroism, isn't it? But it's important. It isn't easy to take action when that action cuts against the grain of everything we've ever been told about idle hands and work ethic and suck it up and nose to the grindstone. But it's brave then staying home, particularly when there are some who would call you foolish for doing it. And thank you for everyone who is taking that seriously. So all of that, I am buoyed by all of that, by this mobilization to take care of us all, because that's what we're doing in this moment. So the Pennsylvania House, District 6, my election, why I'm running, and why I'm here talking with you this evening in this sort of strange campaign environment. I'm running because we can mobilize like this in a way that can build a commonwealth that cares for people all the time in the way we're caring for them right now. The big three of my platform are all centered on opportunity and equity, the right to a clean environment, the right to excellent public education, the right to health care. How important are we seeing that now? Imagine some of the other heroes right now working down at our grocery stores or working on our farms, stocking shelves or getting things ready to head to those shelves, often for low pay. And what might it look like if all of those individuals had health coverage, particularly when they're facing this pandemic? So more broadly, as a candidate, I see the role of government itself as a civic duty. Something that uses the collective power of us all, because that's what government is, not politicians, but instead the representative body of our shared will to protect the baseline for everyone, to keep people from falling in the cracks or being tossed into them. And I think we have to recognize that that latter bit is unfortunately more true than we often want to admit. We have an economic system that's often predicated on punishing people, on breaking their will so they do what some faceless corporate entity wants them to do. They are to be broken to ensure profits. Well, now, what about now? When people are coming together not for profits, but they're doing the work to keep us safe. I'm buoyed by that because I see it as our great civic hope that we care. And that cynicism from voters and politicians, and I see a lot of politicians operating constantly with cynicism, that cynicism has taught us that government is a colossal failure. But it isn't. And it doesn't have to be. We are the government, and we're seeing right now the bright side of how government can be the embodiment of our best selves, working together and pooling resources to take care of the community. That's why I want to be in Harrisburg as your representative, because that's the government I think we can rebuild. So that's my opening thought. And I want to take some questions now. And I see this, again, is the first time I'm doing Facebook Live, so apologies for anything that I mess up along the way. So if you have some questions that you want me to riff on a little bit about the 6th or about me as a person, shoot something in that little text box and I'll see it. I'm going to hit a button here and see what happens. Okay, there we go. So I'm seeing there's a bunch of you here now. So if anybody has a question, so hi Christy and Michael, you're there. Oh, my wife's there, so hi Jennifer. We have a Canadian on the line, Chris Fudge. Hi Chris, hope everything's good up on PEI. Nate, bonjour. So, oh, and Garrett, you're here too. So thanks, Nate says the mic quality is excellent. That is something that I was really hoping for tonight. I'm going to pause awkwardly for a second and see if any questions pop up here across the way. That was a stupid face that I made. So maybe I'll just start talking a little bit, and as the questions come up, I'll monitor them and throw them in, and I'll talk a little bit about the platform that I'm running on, and that's something that shifts as you move forward. Not the platform itself, but there's lots of issues that arise. So, hey, there's a question about state funding important to education. How can we support schools and the disparity of funding due to using property taxes as the main source? That's a really good question. I was just going to talk about public education. I think what we have to recognize is that those of us in northwestern Pennsylvania who complain, and we do complain, about high property taxes are not necessarily wrong. Particularly related to the wages in our area, our property taxes can be high. The more important part of it as well is that the way we have funding for school districts yoked to the districts themselves creates an automatically inequitable situation. So essentially, anytime you're a more wealthy or wealthier district, you're going to have more funding for your schools. And so that creates an unlevel playing field. This is not an easy problem to solve. And I know politicians have sort of dodged it for a long time. I think we need to recognize, though, that, and this is sort of how I think about taxation itself and what that means for our government, is that the more of us are in the pool contributing, the better we can do. And so if we can create more statewide funding models, yeah, some people probably will pay a little bit more, but those would be the ones who can. And those who don't have as much, or the school districts that don't have as much, will get a baseline funding. So I think that's the disparity that needs to begin. Garrett, and I'm reading these. I may not need to read them because you can see them as well. But in case someone's watching later, Garrett Gleason later is saying, how do we bring younger generations and other underrepresented demographics into agriculture? Which I think is a really pertinent question here in northwestern Pennsylvania, where so much of our heritage is agricultural. And it's one of the great benefits that we have in this area. But it's hard for young people to get into agriculture because the cost of entry is really too high. I think that we need to develop some state programs, from mentorship programs that are aided with state funds, to help farmers be mentors to younger individuals. And I'll disclose, I've talked with Garrett about some of these issues, and I owe a lot of my thinking to his insight on this. But we have this opportunity in the city of Meadville and in the city of Erie to think about what we could do with urban farming. And laws can be passed. They have been passed, ordinances that allow that to happen. But at the same time that we have a blight issue in some of our harder hit neighborhoods, and that's true in a lot of Meadville, we can solve that problem by making small urban farms that can actually be a sustainable income growth and offer local foods into our economy. That can be something that spreads across the district. Farmers working on this small scale can start to rebuild that agricultural base. Ultimately, I think, if you got a farm that you've inherited, that's a little bit of an easier way to start. But if you're someone just coming out of high school or just coming out of college and wants to get into digging in the soil, it can be hard to have the money to do that. And I think it's incumbent on us, for food security, for economic security, to have the state really help bring that new generation in. Actually, that's an educational part too. Those are linking together in beautiful ways, is that Some of the short-sightedness of education cuts are that I think about it as making the margins or horizons of what we can imagine narrower. And what we really need to do is think about everything that's possible and try to expand those opportunities so that students can go through a high school or college curriculum and recognize that there may be a future for them anywhere. And instead of imagining the workforce that exists now and training them to fit that workforce is changing so quickly, there's no way to know what fits. So if we start thinking about creative solutions like urban farms or like mentorship programs on rural farms, we can start reimagining what it means to live sustainably. And that's a phrase that I use a lot, is thinking about a sustainable future for here. Hi, Jess Sackle has just tuned in. I feel a little bit like when my son is playing or watching videos of people playing video games, saying hello to people. So, but I'm doing that in the political perspective. Something that you may or may not know about me is, first of all, that I'm from Western Pennsylvania originally. I grew up in Indiana County on a farm, but also my father was a teacher at IUP. So I lived always in this space between agriculture and academia. And it was a farm that was about sustainability. And my father and my mother both really believed in the tenets of Aldo Leopold, who's someone I'd encourage you to check out if you don't know him. And that's all about thinking, hi Jess, thinking about the land as mattering and all the creatures that are living in an ecosystem mattering as much as anything else. Wendell Berry as well was one of the people they really liked. So I grew up in Appalachia, not knowing I was an Appalachian until later. And then as a scholar and a writer, I started studying the history of this region and how stories have been written that have narrowed those horizons. That's why I was referencing those horizons before, is that for a long time, basically since our region was built, the rest of America has told us who we are and what we're supposed to be and allowed to be. And largely that's been as tools for industry. And what's usually left out of that story is us and our agency to decide who we want to be and to have a different relationship to that space. And that's a lot of what I think we need to reclaim in northwestern Pennsylvania, that we do have an industrial legacy, but going back to that industrial legacy isn't necessarily healthy for us, and it isn't actually likely. It's just not the way the economy is working. So we have to reimagine a different economy that's based on the people and their success, and finding a way so that our young people don't have to leave. And that's the other thing about growing up here, growing up in Appalachia in general, is that one of the great calls is to get out. And then we all get called back because we love the place we're from. And we need to find ways to make it so we don't have to get out, so that we can stay and grow together. Yeah, I feel like I'm pontificating a little bit, but I guess that's the dynamic of doing a Facebook Live event. I'm talking to a screen, and you're all out there listening or secretly disappearing, which is also a good thing. The last thing that I'll say, thinking about these parts of the platform, I'll mention the environment, because environmental protection is another big part of the platform. And I know that that's something that people often think is not compatible with development. I'm going to put it in those quotes. But that's part of that history of Appalachia and taking care of the people, is that when our land is abused, we are too, and often that's in the name of industry. So a good basic question, why did I decide to run? Some of it goes back to this story, this growing up in a place where I grew up in the 1970s. I was born in 1975. And they always were saying the same thing. I grew up in coal country, but the coal mines closed in the 1970s. And I heard politicians throughout my life who were talking about all we need to do is bring the coal industry back. And we knew that that wasn't likely to happen. And when it has happened, what we've seen, not so much in Indiana County where I grew up in, a little bit there, but in West Virginia and other parts of Appalachia, is that the coal mining jobs have come back often as non-union jobs, and I'm a union supporter. with greater risk to individuals. Black lung has roared back. And so when we talk about trying to restore the glory of what we used to be, we're often forgetting that that comes with quite a bit of pain. But we kept electing officials that said that same old stuff and did that same old stuff, and there was no progress. And I see the same thing happening in northwestern Pennsylvania, where there are too many elected officials who are happy to actually provide very little for this broad region. I think this is true in state representation in a lot of districts. It's also true in federal representation, that they're cashing checks, all kinds of checks, and they're going to Harrisburg and they're going to Washington, D.C., and they keep spinning the same story about what we are and claiming somehow we'll magically get back to something that we probably don't want to return to. Question on fracking. Oh, see you, Nate. Thanks. Oh, I hope to do it again. Maybe we'll do it in French next time. So Garrett has a question on fracking, and I am not a fan of fracking, and I understand that there's a lot of people who see natural gas as a great way to build the economy. But several things come to mind, first of all. One is when we think about the ethylene cracker plant that is being built in the Ohio Valley with a great taxpayer expense. The state has put a lot of our dollars into building that. We know that that is going to further exacerbate one of the worst air qualities in the country. And so there is a great human risk to the cracker plant itself and the pollution it'll create. There is also great human risk, I believe, to the fracking process itself. I don't think people are wrong when they're concerned about water quality. Also, in trying to encourage the development of that economy, we have seen legislation that is turning back the clock on clean water protections. And that's another moment where we're being told the economy matters more than the people. So, on the flip side, I do see natural gas as being used potentially as a bridge fuel. Now, this is a term that is used a lot. I don't think it's actually used properly. I think people say bridge fuel, particularly people in the industry, when they just mean we want to keep using it. I think we can use it. It is a cleaner burning fuel than coal. And we can use it to move as rapidly as possible to renewables, but we actually need to establish some sort of program where a certain percentage, say just off the top of my head, 20% of the profits of natural gas extraction would have to be put toward renewables. And that could be the company itself using the money to invest in their own R&D, or if they don't want to do the R&D, it would have to go into a state fund where the state would use to develop renewables. And in that way, we could, in the short term, continue to heat our homes and keep the lights on, all the stuff that we do need to have, but actually use that fuel to accelerate our move toward a carbon neutral future. That's not something I hear people talking about with bridge fuel. It's really more, it's the fuel we have right now, so we'll call it a bridge fuel. I don't think fracking is a particularly good part of that equation, though, because of the damage that it does. And also, let's go back to the agricultural question. You know, those pads take up quite a bit of turf. Thanks, Christy, you too. So yeah, I think we need to really think also about what sort of jobs are being built. If I'm thinking about that cracker plant, if I'm thinking about Marcellus development, that only gives us jobs for a short amount of time and usually not for that many people. And the wealth is, as it has always been in this region, going elsewhere, and it comes at the expense of our land and our people and our future of our children as well. So I think if nobody has any other questions right now, I think I might move on from tonight. This has been great. I'm figuring out how it goes. I hope I didn't seem too awkward or blather on too ridiculously. Oh, hi, Dana D'Amico, just coming in, even as I'm starting to wrap up a little bit. I'm hoping to continue to do these and maybe in some more informal coffee hours in the morning. I'll keep posting announcements for that on the Facebook page. If you don't already like the Facebook page, please do it. Please share it. I'd love to meet you in person. I think it's going to be a while before we do that. That's why we have to move this campaigning online. something that I'll plug is I think now is a great time for all of us to very seriously consider using the Commonwealth's new ability to vote by mail. It's unclear on how long we're going to be in social distancing environments, and we have that opportunity. These elections matter. The primaries matter, both explicitly in contested primaries or in ones like mine where I'm the only Democrat on the ballot, to show the force of people. It's another story that I think we keep hearing and sometimes we keep repeating, is that there aren't very many Democrats around here, or Democrats can't win around here. And I've met a lot of people who are either Democrats or who really believe in the values that a lot of Democratic candidates have. And so we need to make sure that we're demonstrating that we're coming out to the polls either virtually or in person, and showing that we care about that civic responsibility of government. So thanks everybody for coming out today. I'll keep this on. Hey, Jess Sackle just got her mail-in ballot approval yesterday. That's fantastic news. Thanks, Jess. And Christy has just put the URL for the mail-in absentee ballot at the bottom. So if you're interested in that, you can copy and paste that and do so. All right. Have a good night, folks. More than anything, stay safe. Spend time with your family and friends. There are certain benefits to having to stay home that we get to reconnect with people. It's not the great reason to have to do it, but we can all make the best of it. I look forward to talking to you again through digital means and in person down the road. And have a good night. Take it easy.